think we all have in our mind, I know we all have in our mind, the way God's supposed to work. Now, it's fascinating, the result of that, because what I've discovered in my own life is that God doesn't always work the way I think He should, the way I think He's supposed to. Sometimes that makes me a little angry. Sometimes it makes me a little frustrated. All the time it makes me a lot confused. But God doesn't work the way we expect Him to. He doesn't perform at the level, I guess maybe I should say, that we expect Him to be operating at. God, this is how you should behave, but you're behaving completely differently. As a matter of fact, this is what leads some people to be atheists. It's not an intellectual argument. It is, well, if God was good, then why, and blank, 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 whatever they want to fire off. In other words, I have decided this is how God should behave. And because these things have happened, that means there must not be a God. Because if there was a God, these things wouldn't have happened, or they wouldn't happen this way, or they wouldn't happen to me, or whatever it is. And so there must not be a God, because if there was a God, He would have behaved this way. And so it becomes an emotional, very visceral anger at God for not behaving like they thought He should. So they respond by saying, well, then I just don't believe that you exist. So we always, a lot of times think of atheism as being an intellectual, like I'm too smart to believe in God, or I've done this, or, and for many people, their arguments are not really, or their arguments might be more intellectual, but their reasons are. And you'll see this. I've seen even very, very brilliant atheists who, in a debate, will make these kind of arguments, not really intellectual arguments, but if there was a God, why would this? So basically, I've decided this is how God would behave if He existed. But God can't exist because I see this. So in other words, if the box was this way, I would believe there's a God. Because the box is this way, I must not believe there's a God, because this is the only box that would allow that there's a God. And so the fact that God doesn't operate the way they think makes them an atheist. Well, in the book of Habakkuk, we run into one of God's prophets who has the same issue. God's not behaving the way He's supposed to. Now, he does not become an atheist, but he questions God. What in the world are you doing? And for those of us that have not rejected that there's a God, even though He doesn't behave the way we expect Him to, He doesn't meet our preconceived notions, I think many of us respond much like Habakkuk. So let me read the verses. I'll give the historical context and then show how this connects to our subject for today. So in Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 12, he states this question, talking to God. Are you not from everlasting, O Lord my God, my Holy One? We shall not die. O Lord, you have ordained them as a judgment, and you, O Rock, have established them for reproof. You who are of purer eyes than to see evil and cannot look at wrong, why do you idly look at traitors and remain silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he? Then he goes on and says some more, but basically Habakkuk says, look, I have a problem. So let's set the historical context so we understand Habakkuk's problem. Habakkuk is a prophet to Judah in the late 700s BC. And he comes preaching this warning about God's punishment. Now, God in the Bible will punish one nation by using another nation. So Habakkuk says, okay, so here's the way it works. So we have a nation doing evil. So God's going to punish the nation doing evil. So what nation He's going to use? He's going to use a nation that's here. So we have a righteousness scale. So let's say it goes 1 to 100. And we have a nation that's a 36 on the righteousness scale. They're pretty bad. They're only a little over a third righteous, about 2/3 unrighteous in their behavior as a nation. So God's going to use somebody that's higher. So they're a 45 or a 52 or somewhere higher on the scale. Habakkuk has a problem, though, because it's his prophet, and God has told him, Habakkuk, this is what's coming. Habakkuk sees Judah at a 36, and God says, I'm going to use a 20 to punish them. And Habakkuk says, you can't do that. You can't use the more wicked to punish the less wicked. And that's why he says, you can't do this. Why in the world do you remain silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he? So he's not saying that Judah's righteous, like, I mean, they're up there in the 80s or something. I mean, they're way down low. We deserve punishment. But God, you can't use, not the wicked Chaldeans, Chaldeans or Babylonians are the same thing. You can't use them. Man, they're worse than Judah. So God's behavior in using the Chaldean, it doesn't fit Habakkuk's theology. He says, God, you're from everlasting. Like, you can't look at evil. So how can you look at the evil Babylonians and use them to punish your people? You can't do that. And God's like, yes, I can. So Habakkuk is struggling with God's behavior. The specifics in Habakkuk's day were specific to him, but the general idea applies to all of us. And let's face it, let's be honest. You and I, we struggle with what God does many times. We may not use the exact words that Habakkuk uses here in chapter 1, verses 12 and 13, but I'm telling you, we think like Habakkuk. And there are more of these. There are more struggles that Habakkuk has. Like it's not just once that God doesn't behave according to our plans. It seems like God regularly doesn't operate the way we think that he should. And these situations always lead to prayer that says, God, why? God, why are you doing this? God, why are you allowing this to happen? God, why? You wouldn't ask why if it was the way you thought it was supposed to be. Well, that's the way God works. There's no why. We know why, because that's how God operates. It's A, and then it's B, and it's C, and it's D, and it's E. It's not A, and then X, and then D, and then L, and then B, and then Q. It's not like, God, I think they're not supposed to work that way. I've got you lined up ABC, and you seem so random and all over the place. So what do we do when God doesn't act the way we think that he should act? When God doesn't fit our preconceived notions? When God seems to be doing something out of order, using the lower to punish the higher when it really ought to be the other way around? Well, I'll read a couple other verses from chapter 2. So chapter 2 starts with, I will take my stand at my watchpost and station myself on the tower and look out to see what he will say to me and what I'll answer concerning my complaint. So he says, look, I've explained to God, you're not operating the way you're supposed to. So now I'm going to wait for an answer. And so we get this long description, then we get, it actually starts in verse 6, and through most of the end of the chapter, there's going to be this. God says, I'm going to punish Judah with Babylonians, but they're going to receive a final judgment as well. That's kind of how he lays it out. And so he does give sort of an answer, God does, about why he's doing what he's doing, even though he really doesn't, but he sort of does. But the end of chapter 2, last verse, verse 20, really, I think, summarizes. The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. Now, this is not a, hey, let's be quiet and worship kind of verse. That's not what it's saying. So what is this verse saying? Well, it says that, the earth should keep silence. Here's the thing, and I know you're not going to like this. God does not owe you an explanation. What we owe God is our faith and trust in him. God does not owe us an explanation. I know that's uncomfortable. I know it's frustrating. In my life, there have been many times that I thought like Habakkuk, I don't know what's going on. I don't understand why in the world God would do this. Looking back on those, I've seen, I guess what I could call 3 reasons. One, it was punishment. And sometimes I look back and go, that was God's discipline in my life. Sometimes I've been able to look back and see God was shaping me. God was making me the person that I am today. It was not comfortable. It was not enjoyable. But I'm a stronger person for it. I have a better perspective on things, or I have a different perspective on things. It has deepened my walk with the Lord. Whether it was for punishment or to help shape me, all of those have made my walk with Christ deeper. So sometimes I can look back and go, man, at the time I had no idea what was going on. But I can look back now and see, oh, hey, that's what God was doing. Now, I'll be honest with you, that's not many of them. The majority of things I look back and go, I don't really know what God was doing. My answer right now is, I don't know what God was doing. I don't understand. That leaves me with basically the proclamation of Job. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job didn't understand either. It frightens me to think that I would go through the worst thing that anyone could ever imagine so that God could show off my faith in him. But that's exactly what happened in Job. But Job didn't know that. Job didn't have chapters 1 and 2. He didn't know what was going on. He didn't understand. His friends didn't understand either. They thought they did, but they didn't. And then God rebuked them and told them to apologize to Job and offer sacrifice on his behalf. So this is what I'm telling you, okay? The I don't know answer is the one I give the most to people in their lives. If they ask me a question about the Bible or the history behind the Bible or some of those things, oftentimes I can give an answer. What's the Hebrew word for this? I can give you an answer. Or they ask about some theological term, I can give an answer, and it'll be the correct answer. When someone says, why is this happening? Maybe in their own personal life, or maybe it's something they've seen on the news somewhere around the world, why is this happening? My answer is, I don't know. I give you some general vanilla answers. Because sin is in our world, because people are sinful, and some people are really wicked and love living out their sin. Some people are power hungry, and that's how their wickedness comes out. I can give some generic answers like that. But the reality is, oftentimes my answer is, I don't know. And sometimes I've said to people, read the book of Habakkuk. I'm like, what? I'm going to read Habakkuk. God, why are you doing this? It doesn't make sense. But in the end, God is in his holy temple. God sits enthroned over the universe. He is trustworthy, and we can trust him even when we don't understand, even when it doesn't make sense. And even when we look back on what happened before, sometimes it makes sense. But even when it still doesn't make sense, and probably is never going to make sense in this lifetime, when we look back, we still believe that God is trustworthy, and we trust him. And so at some point, we quit asking the question, why? And we just say with Job, blessed be the name of the Lord. So I hope this helps you by not helping you. I hope this helps you when you ask the same kind of questions that Habakkuk did. I don't understand why God operates like he does, why things happen. But I do trust him because he is in his holy temple. And so even though I may question him, I'm never going to doubt him. God bless you, and I hope you have a great day.